Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, and wow, what a week it's been with the European Super League rising and falling, embarrassing fashion. It's been one hell of a week. Here to make sense of it, I've got Henry Hill and Michael McCubs in. Boys, before we even get into the main topics, Henry, have you recovered from what was a really challenging week? I thought it felt kind of like a week from hell for the first part.
Oh goodness, this is I think I'm the only sort of regular presenter who hasn't been on the platform yet to voice my fury at this. so yeah, I've got some fresh ideas. But I mean, I texted you the other day. I'm just emotionally drained by the whole process. I can't quite believe what's happened, and it's kind of morphed into just an all-round disappointment. Really, we're seeing some of the executives coming out with really sort of pathetic statements, sort of half apologies. Agnelli and Perez. Oh, it's just gross, isn't it? Even people like Ferin Soriano, saying we didn't anticipate how much you'd all valued the pyramid system. Like, come on, all these people like playing. Oh, we had no idea it would be like this. Like, get in the bin, quite frankly. Like, they all knew how much people valued this. And Soriano, he's been a part of Barcelona during their glory years. He's been a huge influence within football. People like him should know better. So it's now just morphed into this kind of all-round disappointment, really. But yeah, I mean, it's almost like frightening and exciting to see what might happen as a result of this, and I think we'll probably dig into that today. But yeah, I mean, I've got some ideas that I'm ready to share them.
Oh, good. I'm ready for the wrath of Henry coming down. McCubs, are you feeling fired up and ready to bring the full smite of Continental Club on the European Super League?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the last time I was on video was Monday morning, and we were still processing it, weren't we, Dougie? I mean, we were pretty angry about it, but like I didn't even really, I'd hardly slept, to be honest, from the night before. As soon as we heard the news the night before, I could hardly sleep because I just couldn't. Yeah, I was just trying to process it all. So yeah, I feel a bit like there's a bit more clarity now. Obviously, things have developed massively in 3 days. It's obviously pretty much dead in the water now. But yeah. But I've also heard like differing opinions from overseas as well, which have intrigued me and also angered me a little bit. So I'm sure we can get onto that in a bit as well.
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss, but mainly we are focusing on Kareem Arib's question, who said, how should UEFA, punish these teams without being unfair to the players? That's obviously an enormous question. To clarify, we are filming this on Thursday morning, so by the time it reaches you, there might well be some developments on what UEFA are planning to do in punishment, but as of yet, there aren't any clear sort of announcements from the governing body about what they're going to do to smite down the 12 teams. So we are going to touch on what has gone on, but we're mainly going to look ahead to the future. But Henry, to start with, can you add a bit of context around UEFA, Aleksander Ceferin, because it's been a week from hell for him in particular.
Yeah, you're right, Duke. By the time this goes out, it could be back on. The Super League could be back on again. Apparently,
don't
imagine.
What did Perez say? It's on pause for now. Anyway, what a slime. But yeah, I mean, UEFA, it's really hard to predict what exactly they're going to do going forward from here. Their president, Aleksander Ceferin, he was pretty furious, quite rightly, against this plan. He said they spat in the face, these clubs, against football's traditions and were only motivated by what's in their pockets. He said some pretty strong stuff about people like Ed Woodward and Andrea Agnelli, and we'll get into that relationship a little bit later because that is a lot more complex than I think a lot of people appreciate. And the fact that they released this master plan last Sunday on the eve of when UEFA were going to try and push through their own UEFA Champions League reforms, that's a real kind of power grab on that front too. So yeah, a lot of mistrust and dishonest feelings bouncing around there. And Andrea Agnelli, Perez, it's impossible to see how they can kind of welcome back into the fold from here. We've already seen a lot of the Premier League executives asked to not return to some of their duties. Bruce Buck, for example, at Chelsea, he's been asked to sort of step down from some of his roles there. And I think in Soriano as well, he's been asked to sort of step aside. And it's not that they've been asked to, they've been given the opportunity to sort of leave on their terms, but then I think they might be forcibly removed by the rest of the committee if needs be. And you know what, fair play. And with the ECA, the European Club Association, will these people be able to kind of come back into the fold and have influence once more? I'm just really not sure at all. And if we look at sort of Agnelli in particular, he is Ceferin is the godfather to his daughter. which is kind of a really complex relationship there. It turns out the Athletics claimed that Ceferin, in trying to get hold of Agnelli, called his wife on Sunday night to get to the bottom of the rumours because Andrea just wasn't picking up his phone. I mean, that is really it's kind of bizarre. I feel sorry for Agnelli's wife in this situation, really. But yeah, he got on to claim he'd never met anyone as dishonest as him. So it looks like that relationship is broken inside and outside of business there. And ultimately, UEFA's reformed Champions League sounds like the biggest clubs are actually getting away with what they want, and that's kind of the most bizarre aspect of it all. 36 teams, up from 32, guaranteed 10 games and not 6. That could have huge ramifications for things like the League Cup, etc. if these clubs start getting fussy, because you've got to find space for these games ultimately at the end of the day. Will international games be shifted? What other league kind of structures will have to be altered for that? Don't underestimate just how significant that is in itself. And also there's this big deal about the legacy entries into the place for sort of historically successful teams. So actually teams like that have actually got away with it. And there was a lot of talk in our Football Daily group that actually Arsenal and Tottenham would have got into the Champions League based on this coefficient ruling which they've got so far. So maybe they kind of jumped their gun too early on that much. So yeah, this aspect of European pedigree, that looks like the next thing that is going to be sort of targeted. It remains to really see what's going to happen, because in my opinion a lot of these teams should be punished, and I know that everyone's saying the teams themselves had nothing to do with it, etc. But a lot of other teams in history have been punished for similar things. Like a lot of smaller teams, like it's never the players' fault when a lot of these things happen. It's always on an ownership level, and the only way to really upset these owners is to hit them where it really hurts. And I don't think just handing them giant fines is going to make much of a difference. I think something actually necessary has to happen to the players, whether you like it or not, and the teams, because that seems to be the only way. But I mean, I'll be interested to hear what McCubs thinks on the whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to that too. It just feels like they chose such a weird moment to do this. Obviously, they wanted to put pressure on UEFA, but UEFA were already changing the Champions League to, as you say, to put in favour of these large teams. And then they created this Super League. They announced 12 teams when they needed 20. Who was going to join it when it got that reaction? They put no PR out behind it. The only spokesman they had was Florentino Perez, who seems increasingly senile with every talk he gives, losing track of reality and what young people want to watch. And young people are so alienated from football right now because they can't bloody afford it, Florentino, because of all the ticket prices that clubs like Real Madrid have instigated, all the merchandise that costs hundreds of pounds to buy. So these big clubs, which have created this scenario in football, which is so unaffordable for young people, are then saying, oh, we're going to change football forever just because we don't feel like we're getting enough money. It was a sick idea that wasn't going to work on a sporting level, was never going to work on a marketing level, and they didn't even try to make sense of it, which was the most baffling thing of all of it. And it's ruined these relationships beyond repair. I mean, McCubs, if you're known as Mystic Mike on this channel, what would you want to see UEFA do, and what do you think they will do?
Well, yeah, I mean, the comments from Ceferin seemed fairly soft to begin with. He said, it's admirable to admit a mistake, and these clubs made a big mistake. They're back in the fold now. He seemed, I guess, first of all, relieved that, these clubs are going to be back in UEFA competition for now at least. But yeah, surely a big punishment is needed. I wholeheartedly agree with Henry. There's been a lot of talk in the last day from English pundits and stuff being like, oh well, you can't punish the fans, or you can't punish the players or the managers because they had nothing to do with it. It's like they never have anything to do with these things, do they? We weren't saying that about Bury we were saying about Bury when they got taken out of the Football League, but it was an incredibly harsh punishment. But the fans didn't have anything to do with that, and yeah, it is unfair. It is absolutely unfair. But equally, Bury weren't trying to rip up the entire footballing landscape. That was a very insular thing, and and it affected a very tight knit community. These are clubs who have tried to undermine those kind of communities by this incredibly arrogant plan. So yeah, I think there has to be really, really harsh punishment, and also this might be an unprecedented thing, so they might not be kind of specific laws in place whereby it's like you get this deduction for this deduction for that, because it's not like these clubs have gone into administration or whatever. But but they do need to be clamped down on, because otherwise, it will happen again. Like, Florentino Perez has been trying to push this for the last 11, 12 years. Real Madrid also spearheaded the Super League plans in the 90s, which then got eventually got all those the top 5 leagues, their kind of 4 Champions League spots, and is the reason why today that big clubs from smaller nations still have to go through rigorous qualifying just to get into the Champions League group stages. So I mean, first of all, then there needs to be really harsh punishment, point deductions at the very least. And I think UEFA, I don't know, I feel like they might get a bit of cold feet about chucking them out of the Champions League, because there are the fears that people will not want to watch the Champions League if these clubs aren't in it. That that's why these things have happened, and I think that's interestingly has actually been the viewpoint of some fans. Like I know we've been, I feel like we've been in a little bit of an echo chamber in the UK because there's been such a unified push against it. But if you speak to fans elsewhere, it's not quite as unified. Like, I was speaking to a friend in Barcelona, a lifelong Barca fan, Catalan, and he said the Super League is good for Barcelona, so I'm behind it. And I was amazed. I was like, what? So you would happily, on the rest of football, essentially. I'm not being very eloquent here, but in order to save Barcelona. And he said, yeah, that's Barcelona is dying at the moment financially, and this is something that needs to happen. And okay, we can talk about the smaller clubs, but essentially you're saying, well, right now, like, Barcelona can't have a long-term plan for this. Like, they need a short-term answer to
I imagine Florentino Perez is probably looking for a new PR man, so this guy could be the guy.
Potentially. But this isn't just one guy. I mean, and I'm not going to generalise all Barcelona fans here, but I was so amazed at his response that I then very quickly listened to a Barcelona podcast, which is run by, I think, an American guy and a Catalan guy. And the Catalan guy, who's supported Barcelona for 40 years, his response was, well, whatever's best for Barca, I'm behind it as a Barcelona fan. So, like, I mean, this is not so simple. And we've seen similar kind of responses from fans in Italy as well. Like, where, okay, yeah, Serie A and La Liga are considered, especially by fans in those countries, not to be competitive enough. But I was really, really taken aback at the fact that, some fans are happy to see, the history of a competition and say, a competition like La Liga, potentially, be dead forever, just in order to save their club. It's really quite worrying. And okay, it's indicative of Spain, where, like, most people are Barcelona or Real Madrid fans. There isn't much of a travelling fan culture of going to away games, and there's very, very rarely very much allocation for away supporters and things like that. So the fan culture is very different there, as opposed to, say, Germany or England, where the fan cultures are more. I guess there's a more kind of all-round football fan culture. But yeah, I was really taken aback by that. But I think it also goes to show how desperate a situation these clubs are in. Like, Barcelona's status as a fan-owned club is really on the precipice, isn't it? JP Morgan, they need to pay that loan back to JP Morgan, otherwise they will have a quite a big stake in the club. Obviously, the debts are over $1 billion, aren't they? So, I mean, I understand that fans of these clubs are in a desperate situation, and we can, as English football fans, and especially as for myself, a fan of Man United, as much as I was very happy by the news of Ed Woodward going, and I would love to see the Glazers move on as well as a result of this, as long as as long as we're not taken over by, like, the Saudi royal family or anything like that. But which is always a fear. But even as fans of these, big clubs, the Super League wasn't the be all and end all, and none of these clubs are going to go bankrupt as a result of not being in the Super League. But Barcelona and Real Madrid, on the other hand, especially Barcelona, like this did seem like an actual lifeline, and Koeman spoke out against it. Gerard Piqué spoke out about it. And I'm sure Barcelona can find a way, but they are in a desperate situation. So I get it in that sense. But I'm still absolutely amazed by the arrogance of some people who think that this is the price to pay, essentially, that the rest of European football must pay for the horrendous mistakes that clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona have made, and in particular Barcelona. When you look at the transfer policy of the last few years, it is abundantly clear that the situation they are in right now was absolutely avoidable, and yet they want the rest of European football to pay for it. So yeah, there needs to be really big punishments for this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned Barcelona there, but I mean, Real Madrid have made some massive transfer mistakes of themselves. I mean, I think they spent £319 million in 2019 on Hazard, Jovic, Rodrigo, Eder Militao, none of which have really worked out. I mean, Eder Militao, has picked up a bit of form recently. And then, Florentino Perez is there talking as if it's his God-given right to sign Mbappe.
Yeah,
but,
who cares? Who cares if Mbappe goes to Real Madrid?
It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I mean, what matters is that football continues as we know it, and you don't change the very nature of the game that everyone loves, where, you can better yourself and get yourself into European competition with the right managerial appointment, the right investment, the right signings. And it's not the rest of Europe's fault that Juventus, Barcelona, Real Madrid, etc. have slipped behind the Premier League. And for the Premier League clubs to get involved in this scheme and follow these old, white, senile men into this horrible idea and then pretend that they didn't know what the reaction was going to be, I think they're equally culpable, if not more. I can't believe the Premier League would hand away its competitive advantage, which is the Premier League and the competitiveness and the success of the league, and jump into bed with this crazy idea, particularly when they don't even deserve to be associated with this idea. I mean, Spurs have literally no European history at all. I think before Pochettino arrived, they got into the Champions League 3 times in 25 years. Arsenal, a very similar story. Pretty much nothing since 2006. Haven't qualified for the last, 4 years now. Liverpool won Champions League prior to 2019 this century. Man United have had very little Champions League success. Man City had only reached their second final. Even Chelsea, it's the same story as well. So for them to betray the rest of the Premier League, to betray all the clubs below the Premier League, more importantly as well, to get into bed with this, I thought was absolutely nuts. And it's interesting that you mentioned the opinion from Spain and Italy, because Alvaro Montero, who's a Spanish journalist, went on Sky yesterday and tried to make out that Florentino Perez felt betrayed. Here's some clips.
They're still fighting for this competition to still exist then in some capacity.
Yeah, of course. It seems that it's going to be extremely difficult for this next summer, but they believe that they could fight. Yesterday there was, as I said, a video conference meeting with all the clubs. It keeps on being this meeting 10 hours ago after the 6 British clubs, the Big Six, pulled out of the competition, and they're trying to make strength, the Italian and the Spanish clubs. But obviously it seems that it's going to be extremely difficult because they have lost a lot of power and strength after the British clubs withdrawal.
He then continued on Wednesday night, Florentino Perez, that is, with more madness, claiming Javier Tebas, the La Liga president, was the same guy who put Cadiz players in t-shirts, was the same guy who was behind the Chelsea protest prior to their game against Brighton. He said that nobody had paid the penalisation fee for leaving and that they were all still in this. He claimed that the possibility of signing Mbappe isn't possible without Super League money, which, as we've already mentioned, isn't really the rest of Europe's fault that you've bankrupted your club effectively. The update from Barcelona is that Juan Laporta will not finalise Barcelona's entry into the Super League without the okay from the socios. And crucially, on Tuesday, a Spanish commercial court, imposed interim measures on UEFA and FIFA that stopped them taking action against clubs in Spain. That was according to The Athletic. So there might be a little embargo on any action against the ringleaders in this. But Henry, I suppose here we are on Thursday morning. This is going out on Friday. No one really has won from this, I don't feel, because even, clubs not involved will feel betrayed. I mean, but who are the biggest losers, if that makes sense?
Well, I mean, there's a few names when you think about it, really. I think the Italian clubs might maybe the Milan clubs might kind of get away with this to an extent. Agnelli, I can't see how Agnelli is going to have a place at Italian football again. Apparently during kind of Serie A meeting of owners, they said, well, if these 3 clubs have 300 million euros extra a year, they'll be the only sides that win the Scudetto. And he said, hasn't it been that way for 80 years? I mean, what the arrogance of a man to think he's this like business maestro, and he came up with an idea with literally the flimsiest proposal that you've almost ever seen, deadly like proposal as well. But yeah, I think fingers crossed, he's going to be one of the bigger losers. If we look at kind of the English sides, I think City have got enough credit in the bank with their fans that they maybe get away with it. Similar with Chelsea too. I think they'll be. I mean, I'm really interested to see what happened at Tottenham there, because at the end of the day, Tottenham have kind of grown a lot in the last few years. Amazing, probably the best stadium in Europe in some people's eyes at the moment as well. So I'll be interested to see there. We saw the fan protests kicking off, but yeah, I think the American owners, they're the ones that are really going to get it at the moment. Certainly Joel Glazer, I think that statement saying I'm sorry, for him to come out, he knows he's in trouble if he's actually releasing a press release like that, having to sort of almost beg for forgiveness, isn't he? John W. Henry, I'd be a bit more interested to see, because similar to Tottenham, I think actually prior to this, if you take away like Project Big Picture and stuff like that, I think actually Liverpool under FSG, we would all agree, is a marked improvement on certainly under Tom Hicks and George Gillette before that. And then Stan Kroenke, I mean, get in the bin, quite frankly. I've nothing really interesting to say about him. But yeah, if we look at like JP Morgan is an interesting one, because I was reading in the New York Times that they would have, before they agreed to be associated with this, they would have ran like a suitability test to see whether or not this is the kind of thing they wanted to be involved in. You know, they don't want to go sponsoring anything which might have really negative effects. And that obviously went through the system and came out as, green light, it'll be fine. And apparently they realise now they got that completely wrong. They had no idea about this kind of backlash. It kind of shows the really closed off commercial attitudes that people have towards football sometimes. And it's utterly ridiculous that people seem to be looking past the fan culture. I mean, I've been reading some beautiful things about Bundesliga and the importance of making sure that fans don't feel like they're treated as customers. I think we're all naive to assume that they don't treat us as customers, and I think we do accept it in a certain light. But if you start being, it's like if you go to a restaurant and it's terrible table service and they start being rude to you, that's when you've got a problem. That's when you're suddenly like, look, I am paying for this. I know this is kind of like this pseudo nice relationship going on, but don't take the piss. And I think they went way too far on this one. So I'll be really interested to see. Sorry if my analogy there is just complete nonsense, but I mean,
I quite like it.
The relationship. We know we're paying customers. Do you know what I mean? We're not idiots. That is essentially our role within this system. But when you start abusing that relationship like they've done here, that's when it goes way too far. And I think people should read up on the Bundesliga football and stuff like that, because that's where it's really interesting. But I think the owners are where they're really going to get it. And like I said, punishments need to be handed out. I mean, Look! I know it's a slightly different, but rugby, they had the boldness to relegate Saracens, the English champions, the multi-European champions. They had the boldness to do that, to make a statement saying, you cannot cheat this sport. You cannot just think you can get away with it. And I know it's different. I know football's bigger and there's lots more money at stake, etc., greater commercial reach. But it's no different. There has to be a sweeping legislation and things like that to kind of stop this. And I think that's the other thing that's going to happen. I think Parliament is going to get a lot more involved. I think we will see an independent regulator. I think this is something we should explore later on in a later Continental Club to understand exactly what that might mean, because there will be legislation over this. You won't see ownership being granted, I don't think, in the same level now. And there's a really interesting tweet about one of the guys involved with the potential Newcastle takeover, who said, yeah, you know what, people looking to get in clubs, obviously you want to invest money, obviously you want to make money back, but you can never lose sight on the point of owning a football club, which is its heritage, its embedded kind of function within culture and society, and its supportive nature. So yeah, I think there's going to be massive changes there, and I'm really excited to see what that could do and hopefully steer football towards a better path, because right now this has exposed the gaping holes and problems within this game with the influx of commerciality, which has kind of spread through the game like a bit of a virus, really. And just one quick example, one more thing, it wasn't Wigan's fault that they got the players' fault that they got deducted 10 points last year. It was the owners who messed around with the club completely, and at the end they deserved to stay in the Championship, but they got relegated. And it is what it is at the end of the day. And what has happened here, in my opinion, is way worse. So yeah, I think punishments has to be happening, and I can't see a lot of these, particularly the American owners, and that's nothing against like Americans. I've seen a lot of like anti-American kind of nature about this. It's not about that. It's just these three guys with these three clubs, I think, have more to answer for than the rest.
I do think though you raise a really good point there, Henry, about the fans and fans, we do accept that we're customers to an extent, and even if it's very far removed of what of the relationship between clubs and fans was, say, 30 years ago, we do accept that. But I think this is where the Super League clubs perhaps gain this confidence, is the fact that UEFA, as we know, is been far from perfect in recent years, and I feel like they are somewhat to blame as well in terms of how far they have pushed fans and pushed that relationship. Like we saw in the 2019 Europa League final, where Arsenal and Chelsea fans, the ones who could afford it, by the way, because it cost over £1,000 to just get to Baku, were given 13,000 seats together, or put together in a 70,000 seater stadium. Henrik Mkhitaryan couldn't go because he was obviously scared of being attacked because of the tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which obviously blew up last year, and yet they're still being granted games at the Euros, despite, I think, press freedom there is really awful. So endorsing a country like that, for example, obviously the Qatar World Cup as well. Like there's so many things that football's governing bodies have done in the last 15 years, and okay, they've been met with some backlash, but not the kind of backlash that this has been met with, especially from fans. And I feel like that there was an environment there whereby it was like, well, if the fans will take this, if football supporters and pundits and journalists, and I can't, us a part of this, we probably haven't spoken about a lot of these issues enough, although we have spoken about them a bit, but we certainly haven't dedicated the kind of time we've dedicated to this week. If they can take that, then why can't they take a Super League? Because they've already shown us that they are willing to accept all these awful things that have been happening in football. They'll be able to take a Super League. Why not? So I do think there are serious questions that need to be asked of UEFA. Hopefully with these the Big 12 clubs hopefully having less power now within the ECA and within UEFA, hopefully the first step of that can be to roll back these awful reforms that they're trying to put in place for this awful Swiss model that is just going to make the Champions League even more of a closed shop than it is already.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's certainly not ideal. They're still handing an advantage to the bigger, more rich clubs. It's just less pronounced than the current plans. The final thing I want to say on this is massive credit to the German clubs. Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund, I think RB Leipzig were approached as well. Obviously their 50+1 rule changes the fact they couldn't really get involved in this, but supposedly the chief executives of the Dirty Dozen, as they've been termed over here, were constantly calling them from about Friday to Sunday, trying to get them on board, because they know that a Super League without Bayern Munich and PSG in particular wasn't really a Super League, given that they are the two best sides in Europe, probably along with Man City over the last 2-3 years. So yeah, that was a big step. And also, I've seen a lot of criticism of PSG being like, it's just politically motivated, because obviously they couldn't really, annoy FIFA with the FIFA World Cup coming up in Qatar. That might well be true, but still credit for PSG for not getting involved. Personal motivations aside, if they'd got 15 teams to sign up on Sunday night, I think this probably would have gone through, because they'd have had, much stronger unity. So that's basically our explanation of what UEFA have reacted to this, what they could do. But more importantly, guys, we want to get your opinions from all around Europe. How angered were you by this whole concept, and what do you want to see UEFA do? And what do you think of the UEFA Champions League reforms as well? Because they are far from perfect as well. Get your thoughts in the comments down below, and let's move on to our big match preview. So it feels slightly bizarre previewing a game after a week like this. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I found it very difficult to watch football this week personally. I wasn't interested when I tried to watch Liverpool versus Leeds on Tuesday. Didn't use my half day on Tuesday afternoon to catch up with some of the highlights of European football that I'd missed as well. Felt really demotivated. So it does feel like a strange time to be previewing a game, but the show does roll on. And we could have talked about Real Madrid taking on Real Betis, but they are very much in the bin for us right now. Villarreal hosts Barcelona as well, a fellow snake. Bayer Leverkusen take on Eintracht Frankfurt. You know, a big game, but maybe not the biggest. But instead, we wanted to focus on a league that was not involved in this whatsoever, and a massive title clash as well, because Lille are taking on Lyon, first versus fourth, at Lyon on Sunday night at 8 p.m. They are currently separated by just 3 points. The top four in Liga are separated all by a point, so it couldn't be closer. Wow. McCubs, we are kicking off with Lyon because they're fourth right now, but still, what a season for them. Yeah,
and slightly unexpected as well. Of course, they finished that curtailed campaign last year in, what was it, 7th place, which obviously missed out on Europe, which Jean-Michel Aulas was incredibly annoyed about. Really tried to take Liga into town over that, didn't he? But yeah, they've bounced back really well this season under Rudy Garcia. They're fourth. They're just 3 points behind Lille, who obviously top of the league. What a title race we have on our hands there. And yeah, only Lille have lost fewer than their 4 league games. That's actually half of PSG's tally. They've really less than watertight, haven't they, domestically this term? And their 65 goals is only topped by PSG and Monaco, and only Lille and PSG have conceded fewer than their 32 goals. So they've been pretty solid at both ends. Obviously, Memphis Depay has been in fantastic form again this season. Lyon fans will be incredibly sad to see him go this summer, and how they replace him, I think, is going to have a big saying on the next 3 years of the club, I imagine, because he is so essential to them. But it's pretty remarkable because they lost some pretty decent players last summer, didn't they? They made a profit of 15.9 million euros. They sold Martin Terrier, Amina Guri, Bertrand Traore as well. And their incomings have done a phenomenal job as well. Obviously, Carl Toko Akambi, who was on loan before, has already stepped up his game this term. 11.5 million euros he ended up costing, and he scored 12 and assisted 5 in 30 league games. Only Depay scored more than him in the squad. Tino Kadewere returned from his loan at Le Havre, 10 goals and 3 assists. And Lucas Paqueta has been an unlikely success story as well. 20 million euros from AC Milan, where he really didn't look anything near the kind of player that they thought they were getting their hands on. But yeah, 6 goals, 4 assists in 25 league games. And I think beyond that, that's not exactly the most productive, but he generally looks quite at home in that attack, doesn't he? I think Lyon, whether or not they get into those top 2 positions, can be pretty happy with the progress they've made this season. Their form is a bit mixed. They lost to PSG at home 4-2 back at the end of March. But since then, 1 draw and 2 wins, most recently beating Nantes 2-1 away from home. But they've got quite a difficult run in, and I think this is where they might slip up. Obviously, they've got Lille this weekend, where I think Lille will probably go into its favourites. Monaco after that, and then Lorient, Nîmes and Nice. So they really do need to win at least one of these next 2 games, I think, in order to be serious title challengers.
Yeah, absolutely massive. I feel like Monaco are in a great run of form as well under Niko Kovac. But credit to Rudy Garcia. I think he was a pretty unpopular appointment at the time, obviously with his background at Marseille, but he's done a great job at Lyon, and they've got some awesome players to watch as well. Kakare, Bruno Guimaraes in midfield as well, so it's not just the Depay show. But Henry, they're up against Lille this weekend, and Lille, they just continue to sort of defy the doubters, is what I'm looking to say.
Yeah, you'll both know, talking about Lille and Ligue 1 is the tonic to my difficult week. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Come on, Lille, still top of Ligue 1. They've been first for 11 of the last 12 weeks. They've only lost 1 of their last 15 games. That's a 2-1, an odd 2-1 defeat to Nîmes Olympique on March the 21st. The same day PSG beat Lyon. They've since then played 3, 1-2, drawn 1, scored 4 and conceded 1. And that last stat is kind of emblematic of their season this year. Their title bid has been built off that magnificent defence. No side in Europe has conceded fewer than their 20 league goals. That's amazing, isn't it, really? Level with Atletico Madrid, for context. Manchester City have conceded 23. Now, the thing about Lille, which is so frustrating, is for every time PSG drop points, Lille seem to just walk away with a draw. They've never quite been able to put their noses properly ahead. They've had a number of opportunities. 10 draws this season. Only 4 sides in France have actually drawn more. PSG, by comparison, have drawn 3, which means that for all these defeats that PSG have been racking up, their win rate is actually still pretty strong, and that's what's kind of keeping them in it. That's the problem there. And there's not really much excuse if you look at the Lille attack. They're 4th for shots and 2nd for shots against behind Monaco, who I really think are the dark horses in this. I mean, I'm not sure if you can call them dark horses. They're 1 point behind, but Monaco are the informed side out of all of them, so they really need to be watched out. However, what could work in Lille's favour is their record against the big sides. Certainly in this game anyway, is pretty strong. They've beaten Monaco 2-1, Marseille 2-0, PSG 1-0 as well, and they've drawn against Lyon and PSG as well. But once again, they're losing to lower league sides along the way too. Brest 3-2, Angers and Nîmes as well. So they if by this reckoning, if they can get over this hurdle, maybe the hardest thing for them will be maintaining that momentum against the sides they're expected to beat, if that makes sense. That's maybe where they'll get itchy feet as we go into the run-in. But as we've said, like one defeat in their last 15 is really solid form. So, fingers crossed. They've got some really excellent experience running through that side. We talked about Benjamin Andre quite a lot. We were singing his praises last week. 3.4 tackles and interceptions, which is kind of nuts at the moment. Then on top of that, you've got Yilmaz still scoring goals. Jonathan David coming good. Jonathan Bamba, Ekone. These, similar to Lyon, they've got a super exciting young core of attacking player. Yazici as well, the Turkish player. I've been really impressed with him. And even at the back as well, Zaki Selik, he's averaged over 2.5 tackles and interceptions per 90 this season as well. So yeah, I mean, look, after this, they still have to play Lyon, who've been a bit of a tricky team for a few of them. They're in 5th place at the moment. And then Nice as well in 10th, who you never quite know what kind of a performance you're going to get out of them. But this is their final big test, as we've said. If they can get over this hurdle, then fingers crossed they can just really go for it, because I think they deserve it 100% after the season they put together. And you just get the feeling, if it's not now, it might be a while before we see this happen again.
100%. There will be big interest in their players this year. Zaki Selik, the right back's magnificent. Benjamin Andre being 30, probably not so much, but Sven Botman at the back as well. Ronaldo, their left back as well. I think there'll be serious offers coming in for those teams as well, especially with the French, money deal not going so well for them at the moment. The good thing about this game, though, on Sunday night is both teams are pretty injury-free. The only Lyon injury is Ben Lamry. Cannot pronounce his name because I've never heard of him. He's only played 7 games this season, so not a massive shame. Lille, Renato Sanchez is out, which is obviously a bit more difficult, but they got Soumaré and Benjamin Andre in midfield to cover. 4 of the last 7 meetings between these sides have been draws, but Lyon have won 2 of the other 3 and Lyon just 1. So they probably hold the advantage in terms of form going into this as well. McCubs, what's your score prediction?
Oh God, I haven't even thought about it. I'm going to say... I'll say 2-1 Lille. Oh no, I'll say 1-0 Lille. 1-0 Lille. 1-0 Lille.
1-0 Lille. Okay, he's changing. Henry, what do you reckon?
You know what? I watched the Monaco game against Lille recently. That was pretty cagey. So I'm going to go for 1-1. I think it'll be a 1-1 draw. But shout out just quickly to Maxence Cacaré from Lyon. He's been stunning. He's a real star of the future in that central defensive role. So yeah, shout out to him. But yeah, I think this game will be quite cagey. 1-1, but obviously fingers crossed for Lille to emerge winners.
Yeah, I think you guys are about right on this. I'm going to go 2-0 Lille just to be a bit different, but I think it might be a bit tighter than that. Guys, get your score predictions in the comments down below, and let's roll straight into our quickfire question, because I thought it was an interesting one. I wanted to get these guys' immediate reactions. It's from Swagato is back, and he says, what are your thoughts on Messi and Ronaldo remaining quiet on the whole situation? Now, McCubs, I don't think it should be the player's duty to come out and defend or attack something that their employers have set without their knowledge. But were you surprised that Messi and Ronaldo stayed quiet on it?
I didn't really notice, to be honest. If I'm honest, I really didn't. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'd have expected out of the two, perhaps Messi to come out because he has been very outspoken against his club in the past. But I think that's probably, I think if Bartomeu was still in charge at Barcelona, I imagine Messi would have spoken out. But obviously he is, on very, very good terms with Joan Laporta. I think this Super League, we'll have to wait and see. But this Super League could have been the difference between them offering him a very good contract to stay and not being able to. So in that sense, who knows what Messi thought, but. No, I wasn't overly surprised. I didn't really think about them, to be honest. I wasn't thinking, why aren't the two biggest names in football speaking up about this? I don't think they needed to in the end. But But yeah, I don't really have a huge opinion on it. But I do think, I think Messi, if Bartomeu was still there, obviously Bartomeu did have a big role in this. I imagine he obviously spilt the beans on it, didn't he? I think if Bartomeu was still there, Messi probably would have spoken out. But as it's Laporta in charge, I think no. And as for Ronaldo, I'm not really sure. What his stance would have been on it, if I'm honest.
Fair. I mean, Henry, how do you think? Because players were almost left in a situation where they had to pick between representing their country at Euros and World Cups or playing in, the Super League for the biggest clubs on the biggest money. I mean, how do you think if you were a player, you'd have felt if you were forced into that situation, and how angry do you think they'll be?
I think listen, I think the guys at Liverpool who spoke out, I'm not surprised. Jordan Henderson, James Milner, Jurgen Klopp, these are pretty respectable blokes who I think have the integrity of the game at heart. I don't think they're particularly money driven, etc. and stuff like that. So I'm not surprised by that. I don't think there's this expectation on all footballers to be very vocal, etc. And I think that's kind of unfair. A lot of us don't appreciate where these guys have come from. Not everyone is built with that kind of mentality. Obviously, what Marcus Rashford's doing is incredible, but to paint everyone with the same brush is just frankly unrealistic. And I think there's a really good podcast Louis Theroux does with Troy Deeney, where Deeney goes into a bit more detail about that, looking at where a lot of these players have come from. So I'm not going to sit here and sort of criticise every player that didn't come out. And some of them probably are just money driven, and that's just the reality of the game. So that's another thing that we've almost just accepted as fans. And whether or not it's appropriate that Haaland and Mbappe are asking for £450,000 per week this year, I mean, probably not, really. It's probably not, but that's kind of the way the game's going, and that's that. But I mean, Messi and Ronaldo, just quickly, like McCubs said, I didn't even think about this prior to reading this question, but I'm really not surprised at all. I know they do loads for UNICEF. They do have their various charities and foundations, but I can't think of many times where they've used like a speech or public platform to really, really go after like a matter that really means something to them. I remember the Ballon d'Or a couple of years ago when Megan Rapinoe got up and did a quite beautiful, eloquent speech about racism and Raheem Sterling and everything that he's done there. Messi won his 6th Ballon d'Or, and it was the same old boring spiel about, thank you to my teammates, thank you to Barcelona, etc., etc., etc. And it was just kind of like, well, there we go. You know what I mean? You can criticise me and say, it's not an anti-Messi stance, it's not an anti-Ronaldo stance, but I think in terms of speaking up these kind of issues, I haven't always seen it from them, and they are the biggest players in this. So, but I mean, look, if they agreed with the Super League, then so be it. But yeah, I'm not surprised to have heard nothing from them. But I wouldn't be surprised, on the other hand, if Ronaldo uses this as an excuse to get out of Juventus if this is what he wants to do.
Fair enough. Very good answers from both of you. For Swagato's Backs question. I hope you enjoyed that, Swagato. Guys, that's all we've got time for on Continental Club for this week. I think we all need a weekend. I hope you guys, the fans, enjoy your weekend. Switch off from football. Switch off from the hell that was the Super League for this week. But don't forget about Football Daily and Euro Football Daily, because McCubs, we've got some great content coming out this weekend, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're carrying on kind of Super League themes. Over on Football Daily, I've just voiced an explainer on UEFA and kind of echoing some of my thoughts on UEFA earlier, about the kind of, first of all, the genesis of UEFA and kind of a lot of the trouble that UEFA have got themselves into in recent years, and that as a backdrop to the Super League. That's coming out on Saturday. Henry, I think you've done an explainer as well on EFD, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I've just done it. It's about actually relevant to what we're talking about. It's why Bayern Munich and PSG said no. So it's really kind of digging into a lot more of those details. President Aleksander, kind of why maybe he wasn't so interested in it, and looking a bit more at that 50+1 rule and how it made it very hard for a lot of the German clubs to go for it as well. So yeah, I enjoyed writing that a lot.
Nice. Sounds like you're in for a treat on Football Daily and Euro Football Daily as ever this weekend. Have a good one, guys. We'll catch you next time. Bye.